Hi and welcome to RC Models, and this the final and effectively 8th video in the series converting the Bruder Jeep Wrangler to full radio control. In the previous videos we've covered the dismantling, trimming the chassis, sorting out the steering servo, the front and rear axles, doing the wheels, and in the last video trimming the body so that it would fit on the chassis with all of the stuff inside it. In this instalment we're going to be covering a number of things. First of all, we're going to be doing the lights, and secondly we're going to be installing some plugs in the back here. One of them is to power the auxiliary channel and the other is to give another set of controlled lights. Just before we get going, I thought it might be quite useful to actually demonstrate where we're going to end up. So I'll just remove the truck we're going to be working on and turn to the prototype. I'm going to turn the lights down so that you can see properly what's going on. Okay, you should be able to see properly now. So on the transmitter, if I push this button here, which is the channel 3 button, you'll see how it turns the front lights on and off. And the rear ones, and I'm actually quite pleased that the red lights at the back here aren't too bright. And then if I add the trailer, I'll put this here so that you can see everything, and I'm going to plug both of the leads here into the back of the Jeep, so I'll just do that. There's one, there's the other one, and hook it on. Like so. Okay, so you can see the truck here and you can see a trailer light there. And then if I move the channel 4 knob on the transmitter, we've got the ramps going up and down. The trailer has been modified to take the skid loader. However, both the trailer and the skid loader will be subject of separate videos. Let's get the lights back on. Okay, one other thing I thought that I'd mention is that I found a good way to put the exhaust back on the car, and I'll be covering that in the video too. The parts which I'm going to be using in this final stage include some red LEDs, some white LEDs, a couple of 100 ohm resistors. You could buy a single 200 ohm one, but I have quite a lot of those. A 47 ohm resistor, some more thin black wire and red wire. These are both silicone, which makes it easier. A Turnigy on-off switch, one more 3D printed part, and also we're going to be putting the stickers on. The reason that I mention this is because I think that the backlights will be more effective if the stickers go on afterwards. Okay, let's get started. Okay, I think that we might as well start off with the easy bit, which is the exhaust. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is to trim down these tabs here so that we're only left with about 1mm on each one, because this is the place where the receiver is in the back of the car. So I'll just do that carefully with the Stanley knife. This is fairly soft plastic, so it's quite easy to chop through. Obviously being extremely careful with your fingers to make sure that if the blade was to break or you were to slip, you won't hurt yourself. And that's probably about right. I need a little bit more off there. That looks good. And then taking our 3D printed part, and the part is exactly the same width as the gap between these tabs. So line that up, making sure that it's the right way up. So there is a slight curve over the top in the 3D printed part. The curve goes towards the top because it's the same shape as what's in there. I'll just put that in. So. And then taking my 1.8mm drill bit, I'm going to go straight through. And then taking a 2mm drill bit, I'm just going to drill that hole out. like so, and then taking an M2 bolt, which is just under 10mm in length from end to end, and if you haven't got one as short as that, just trim it down with a Dremel. We're going to screw one onto the other. It can help just to open up the very top of that hole with the 2mm drill bit. Screw it all the way in. Like so, and the bolt shouldn't really be sticking out of the top. Take the model and it should fit on there quite nicely, and then using the glue gun get a good splodge on there. Don't hang around too long, and you should better stick it down. Just leave that to set for a minute, and then we should be able to just take it off. Now this is something that we can return to later because there will be some more trimming to do, but it's actually quite helpful to get to this stage now. We need to take the body back off, so undo the screws that we put in last time. Keep going until you're clear of the red tabs. And then lifting from the back, you should be able to release it. At the front, make sure you have taken your battery out. Thread the plug through and the body should come off easily enough. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a couple of 2.5mm holes. The first one, and if you line it up against this piece here, is going to go about there. Perhaps making sure that you push the receiver down a bit so that it's out of the way. And then similarly you're going to make a hole in line with it into the side here. So, and then taking your drill bit, just link the two holes up. Take a cable tie, and I'm using a white one so that it shows up better on the video, but I think I'll probably use a black one if I was building a model for myself. And pull that through, and then flip the model over, and then plug a servo extension cable into channel 4, because we're going to be using channel 4 for the auxiliary, the ramps going up and down. We're actually going to be using channel 3 for the lights, so we'll just plug that in, making sure that the white wire is at the top so that the cable is plugged in the right way around. And then we thread this through the hole in the bottom, making sure it's not twisted in any way, and that should go back okay. Just put my speed controller cable back in. It's nicely tucked away. Turn it back upside down, and then just position the plug where it's going to go. And I've actually got the white going towards the inside of the truck. That seems to be sitting in there nicely. Just before we glue it in, the thing to remember is that it's actually going to pass underneath the cable, something like that. So let's just put that in there. Okay, and we'll get the glue gun out and we can do a quick couple of dabs of glue to secure this in place. Okay, so I'm going to put some along the bottom there and then some across there. Taking my plug and just putting it in the place where I want it. That's stuck okay. Leave that for a few moments to dry. Now if you've managed to get some glue into the front of the plug here like I have, it's just easy enough just to pick it out carefully with a knife. Okay, so make sure that's all stuck down nicely. If it isn't, just pull it off, scrape out the glue and have another go. This wire here will pull through so it's nice and tight against there, and you'll notice that we've got a load of excess wire. In theory I guess it could be folded up, but I don't think that's really the ideal thing to do. So I think that what we're going to want to do is shorten the wire a bit, and lining up with this orange piece here, if you chop the wire about there, like so, bring the other end round to meet it and leaving an overlap of about, I would say about 1 centimetre. So I'm going to chop that there. Keep this because you never know when you might want to extend a servo cable. And then I'm going to take this out of the receiver. So, put it back upside down, and then I'm going to solder these wires together and make sure everything's protected with some heat shrink. So I'll just go ahead and do that. Okay, so that's the soldering done with the heat shrink in order to prevent any of the wires touch each other or coming undone. Post that back through. Plug it back into channel 4. So, flip it upside down. Do up the cable tie. Doesn't have to be ridiculously tight, but it's just going to keep that wire from dangling down and catching on things. And chop it off. Now we can return to the exhaust. And what I'm going to do is, in line with this tab here, I'm actually going to trim all the way down, and then in line with the very end of it I'm going to trim down as well, and then I'm going to slice it across. You've got to be very careful doing this, so I'll just score it like so. And then that should just snap out. A little more trim with the knife. making sure at all times that the knife is going away from me. Just go down there and across, and then I can just clean it out slightly, and I think that that should be okay. And then with a bit of luck, the exhaust should go straight back on. Nice and firmly like that, with the back of the plug and the wires just folding into that recess that we've made. Again, if you're wanting just to have this third channel but not do the lights, then effectively that will be the end of the model. But we don't want to stop here, we're going to do the lights. Okay, if you're going to do the lights, the next thing you want to do is take this straight back off again, and then make a couple of holes in the back here in this patch. So I've made one hole here, this is a 2mm drill bit, and another hole here. And then taking a JST extension lead, and as I think I mentioned previously, there are links to all of the parts and the bits and pieces which I'm using to the extent that I managed to find them. And I think that these come in a pack, but they're a very useful thing to have in your stock anyway. So we take one of these and we're going to stick it onto the back of the other plug that we put there, and it's actually quite helpful to have it the same way round as the other one, so that we've got the black towards the outside there and the red towards the inside. That way the polarity of both of these plugs is the same. It just makes it easier when you're plugging the model in to know that the red is always on one side and the black is on the other side. So we're going to stick that on the top here towards one side, and again we're going to use the glue gun. Okay, so just get a spool drill there, a goodly amount, don't hang around too long. Get the two of them lined up. That's okay. Leave that to cool down for a minute. Okay, that's nicely stuck down. You may even want to reinforce the black a little bit by squirting some down in there as well. But you do need to leave some space because we've got some more wires to thread underneath in a minute. Okay, once that is properly cooled and set, what we're going to do is we're going to thread these wires here underneath everything. So I'll just do that. It might actually be easier to do them one at a time. It's the black one. And the red one. Pull them nice and tight so that they're not hanging down at all. That's good. And then we're going to thread them through the two holes that we just made in the back. There's one. There's the other. Flip it upside down, we can see them coming out. I don't particularly want them between my aerial wires, so I'm just going to pull it over the top. That's that. And if we look underneath, it's all nice and neat, and providing everything's sitting in the right place. We're going to leave putting the exhaust back on for a bit because we're going to need to be getting to this area to deal with the rear lights, so we'll just leave that like that. We do know that the exhaust would go on easily if we wanted it to, and the wires are all quite tidy in there. I think a quick cup of tea is called for at this point. Okay, now on to the switch. The Turnigy switch does come with instructions, and there are different modes which you can select by putting these jumpers into different positions. The positions we're going to use are just the default ones with both jumpers inserted in there, so we're going to leave that. You can change it for different circumstances, but I don't think that that is part of what this video is about. Okay, so we've got two positive cables here, and this is basically what it switches. We've got the wire that goes to the receiver. The orange one here is equivalent to the white, so this is the one that carries the signal, with the brown and red being the positive and negative. So we'll just get this plugged into channel 3, but before we do, we're going to thread it through this hole here, which has been getting tighter all of the time. So if I can get that out, that's good. Lift up the receiver a bit, which is now much tighter because of that auxiliary channel we put in, and get this plugged into channel 3. Once we've got this one plugged in, we aren't going to need to take the receiver out anymore, so that is good. That can go back down in there. Make sure that our wires are all pushed down, and we can pull that through there so that we're going to have nothing fouling the back of the body when it's put down onto the chassis. We do have quite a bit of excess cable, but I don't think it's really anything to be worried about. We've got lots of room down here and inside the back here to tuck it away if we want to. In order to help keep it in place, I'm going to drill a couple of 2.5mm holes here. Just take it out first. Probably about 5mm from the top. These two red wires here can then thread through. Actually, they're a bit tight. I think I'll go for 3mm instead. That's better. Make sure it sits in there nice and flat, and when you push the suspension up and down, you can see that there's actually still plenty of room in there for it. The wire all tucked away, and we're ready to move on to the next bit. Now, the lights get their power from the same place as the battery, which is this terminal block here. So we're going to want to have this red wire going into the socket over here. To do this, it's probably easiest to undo the screw holding the terminal block down so that you can get to everything. Just get the screw completely out of the way. So that should make it a little bit easier. And so it's going to share this terminal here. So we'll just undo that one. So taking one of these wires, and it really doesn't matter which, you're going to want to strip a little bit more off, so an extra couple of millimeters. Remember that these wires need to be posted through the hole at the back here. I'm actually going to go around the back of the aerial wire before it goes in there. Like so. And then try and get both of the wires into the hole, which may be easier said than done because the hole is quite small. Do it up. And just check that the wires are in there firmly enough, both of them. That's okay. And so we should have positive power going to our switch. Now, if I want to test to see if everything's working, I can put one of the terminals on the minus and then the other one on the end of the wire coming out of the speed controller. So let's just do that. And if you look at the voltage below, it's showing 7.5 volts. If I throw the switch, the voltage is now showing nil. So we know that there is power going into this and that the switch is working properly. And then for the negative wire for the lights, we're going to want to cut ourselves a couple of inches of slightly thicker silicone wire, I would suggest. Tin both ends of it. And then put one end of it in the back of the terminal block, so we'll just undo that. Pop it in there alongside the other wire. They should both go in okay. Make sure that they're still firmly in. That can then post back through our hole there. That should be enough. And bolt it down again. Eventually we'll post this underneath the aerial wires, but for now it's probably best to have it flapping around so that you've got a bit of distance on it and we can get some heat shrink on when we want to. Now, returning to these wires which come off the red plug at the back, we're going to want to extend each of those by about 3 inches. So I'm using some of the thicker silicone wire, and I've pre-tinned the ends which are going to go on here, and we're going to use some heat shrink, so I'll just do that. Okay, and these are going to post through the holes that we've got in the back. Just push them through. So now the red one is going to combine with the other red one coming off the switch, and so we're going to strip that back a little bit, like so. Probably strip this one a little bit more. Twist them together. Get some solder in there, and then similarly with the black wires. So this is the black wire coming off that plug in the rear bumper and the one that we just added to the terminal block. Twist those together. Would have made life easier if I hadn't tinned them first. That's okay. And so what we've ended up with is we've got a positive and a negative for the lights, and it's coming out at the moment at 7.4 volts. All of the wires for the lights are going to be soldered onto these two, and when the light circuit is live, it will not only turn the lights on the truck, but it'll also put 7.4 volts to the back as well. So any resistors that we put into the lights inside the truck, we're going to have to put similar resistors in the trailer, otherwise it will blow the LEDs. Okay, so I think that this is quite a natural break point, so I'm going to break this video at this point, and then when I come back I'm going to do the front lights, and depending on how long they take I might make a separate video for doing the rear lights.